Okay, everybody, let's recap what we talked about today, okay? So first of all, we talked about even and odd functions again, all right? So here's an example. Even function is an x squared. We know it's even because it reflects over the y-axis. That's what makes it even, okay? X squared is a great example. If I were to spin it around the y-axis, it spins onto itself, so it is symmetrical with the y-axis. So it is symmetrical over the y-axis, okay? And we talked about odd functions. And if it's an odd function, we know that it will rotate 180 degrees around the origin, like a pinwheel. So if I had to spin this 180 degrees, it just goes, I'll show it again, spins onto itself. That's an odd function. But sometimes it's hard to tell because you can't graph it. So we need a formula. So here's our formula. If it is even, this will happen. This will happen, okay? If it's even, then we know that f of x is equal to f of negative x. What does that mean? Well, that means if we test it, for instance, if you were to put a negative in here, a negative x squared, right? Think about this. If you had y equals a negative x squared, well, I made all my x's negative. Make your x's negative. I did that. And I know if I square negative, a negative times a negative is a positive, that will equal x squared. So if you can get negative x to equal the original, then it is definitely symmetrical. Okay, so here's an example of it again, okay? So here's x squared plus 4x to the fourth, okay? Is it even? Well, let's test it. So we make every x negative. That's what I did. Got a negative x squared, a negative x to the fourth. Okay, here's what I know about negatives, okay? A negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative times a negative times a negative is still a positive, okay? So, in this case, f of x is equal to f of negative x, right? I mean, these two are equal. If they are equal, then it has to be even. So this function is even. We could graph it, and you'll see it is, okay? All right. Now, what about odd? Well, odd's a little bit different because we're going to do two things. We're going to make all the x's negative, and then we're going to make the equation negative. Okay, well, let's check that out. Okay, first, let's do all the x's negative. So that's the first thing. Okay, so let's see. Here's an example, x cubed minus 8x. Is it even? Is it odd? Well, first of all, make all the x's negative. Okay, so I made all the x's negative. Okay, there's an x. I put negative inside of it. There's an x. I put a negative inside. Okay, so then, first of all, we do is I know that, well, a negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. So a negative x cubed is just a negative x cubed, right? And then a negative 8 times a negative x, negative times negative is a positive, right? Then the next piece you do is you make the entire thing negative. So I bring through a negative. Okay, that's the next thing. Bring through the negative into what my answer was, and a negative with a negative makes a positive, and a negative with a positive makes a negative. Okay, so in this case, then we could say that f of x, that's this function, is equal to negative f of negative x, so therefore it is odd. Okay. Now what about something that isn't? Well, here's an example of something that isn't, okay? G of x is x squared plus 1. So let's try even first. So I make x negative. That is not going to simplify at all to the original. Okay, not at all. And then if I have a negative negative x, that's not going to work either. So you can just see that. Okay, so our homework then was, I believe our homework was page 187, 188 out of our book. And then that's all I have. Okay, good. I will talk to you tomorrow.